Stalker was pretty heavy on the atmosphere and the like spookiness and oh no mutants and all this other shit. You imagine that driving through. I keep wanting to call it Dark Valley. What's the name of it? Dark Forest or whatever the fuck. I don't know. Of course, I'm going to blank on it in the moment, but imagine driving through that and it's like in the middle of the night and then you run out of fuel. Like that. That would fucking be pretty fucking spooky, wouldn't it? And Boiling Point, even though it's not really a like scary game or suspenseful or whatever the fuck you want to call it, if you run out of fuel in that game and kind of get stuck, in the middle of the forest and they got fucking jaguars or whatever, I mean, that game can be pretty fucking scary too. Like you imagine if you were stuck in that scenario in real life. I don't know, it kind of reminds me of the Vietnam War movies where they'll talk about, like they were more worried about getting fucking malaria or whatever. But then I remember this one African dude I used to watch on YouTube. And he's like true African American. He actually moved to the United States from Africa. But he talked about back when he lived in Africa, he used to just have malaria all the time. And I was like, well, fuck. But yeah, you imagine that. It's like that's the ultimate horror movie is that you're just, oh no, the mosquitoes are attacking, right? It's kind of crazy how easy you can get fucked up from shit you either can't see or can barely see or like don't see till it's too late, like some bullshit like that. But I think that would have been really awesome if it had been in the final game with Stalker. But that was, in a way, at the time, because Stalker wouldn't come out for another couple years, Boiling Point was sort of my way to pretend I was playing Stalker in a way. And I was just imagining, oh man, I can't wait to drive the vehicles in Stalker, right? And shit like that. But also because it came out a little bit after Far Cry, it was also cool to be able to, like what if Far Cry was like truly open world or something? Although in practice, the only thing Far Cry and Boiling Point really have in common is, both guys have a kukri as their, melee weapon. It's not a machete, it's a kukri. There's a difference. But, and I guess it's like vaguely tropical looking or something. But, yeah, it's half joking. And now that I've watched some videos, I'm not even the only one to ever say this, but, you know, uh, Boiling Point probably has more in common with Morrowind than it does with Far Cry. Although something that sort of escaped me back in the day when I played it was the RPG mechanics. I like RPGs the way Stalker did it, but, I'm not generally a fan of like leveling up and shit like that. But Stalker was more on the side of RPG in the sense of dialogue trees and fetch quests and shit like that. Which, if you know how to play the game and you just don't go to Pripyat, NPP, you can essentially play vanilla SOC as like an open world game. There's certain quests you can take over and over, and there's some characters that you can play it in such a way that it becomes an infinite repeatable quest, which is an easy way to get some of the better artifacts. But I don't know. I'd say Clear Sky is when Stalkers start to go off the rails because they removed all the cool stuff, like the stupid, you know, the radar thing to find artifacts instead of just finding them, right? It was just so much cooler to just happen across a rare artifact, right? Or like the moonlight artifacts to make you run faster, pretty much, or run further. They're only visible certain times of night, right? Like midnight to was it 4 a.m. or whatever the fuck it was. That like shit like that's cool. And you start to see like it's no wonder the later games kind of sucked because all the talent fucked off to 4A. But that was another thing that was pretty interesting is that Stalker was supposed to have a faction system from the very beginning, and it was cut from SOC. and they eventually added it to Clear Sky, and then, I was excited for that at the time, and then once Clear Sky came out, I wish they hadn't. But Boiling Point had that stuff a couple years before it came out. Before Stalker, first, before Shadow of Chernobyl came out. And it's just crazy to think both of those fucking games could have potentially came out in like 2003 or something. But I'm not a fan of the Latin American type of, you know, overall world designs and stuff. In Boiling Point, I've never really been a huge fan of that. Like even with Far Cry or like Crysis in the early parts before the alien bullshit, I'm not a super big fan of beach and like tropical shit. It's okay, but still, you could tell the level designers were really talented. And Shadow of Chernobyl, as far as the actual settings in the game, is absolutely way further up my alley. Um, but you can tell, again, the labor of love shit. The level designers on Shadow of Chernobyl were like fucking beyond talented, right? Like holy fuck, they're so meticulous on the details. Even like the washers on the bolt, before the nut on like some random girder, in some abandoned underground, you know, spookiness generator facility or whatever. Some fucking controller brain, poltergeist shit. Um, and Boiling Point, Shadow of Chernobyl, You Are Empty, Painkiller. It's like the biggest influences, or most of them, on my own personal level design, are Slavic developers. The few exceptions would be ones like Doom 3 or Soldier of Fortune 2 or shit, or like Condemned, shit like that, and Fear, that are just industrial, dilapidated back alley stuff already as well. It just looks slightly different because it's the U.S. instead of nowhere post-Soviet Union. But one of the other ones that's a Western influence, that's Half-Life 2. I mean, it's fucking designed on purpose to look like Eastern Europe in the first place. But yeah, something I always like to do with making my own levels would be like, because of the way Shadow of Chernobyl looked, I love the like, the different like stair wells and like railings on them. And I would actually go in Source Engine and either use microgeometry or try to simulate how Radiant does it with NURBS using displacements, and do how they did it, where it's like every single little railing, piece of metal in the step itself or the handrail or whatever was meticulously detailed out and had the fucking, there'd be like these little slight bends to it and all this. This shit is just phenomenal. But, as Yahtzee said with Painkiller, it gives me an architectural stiffy, but I've always been a fucking nerd for, abandoned whatever construction warehouse, back alley bullshit in video games. I always thought the shit looked fucking awesome. But most of the Western games that really appeal to me visually look like they could have might as well have been made, in Russia or Poland or Ukraine or Czech Republic or like Slovakia or wherever. Most of the games I like come from countries of those areas, and I think a big part of the appeal visually of the games is just due to how realistic they feel, even if they don't necessarily look realistic. I mean, they look, in most of the games I play, they look beyond realistic and like true to life in a lot of ways with the detailing and all that. But there's just something about the atmosphere of those games, right? Like You Are Empty. It's just kind of bizarre, silly monster designs and just kind of ridiculous looking in a lot of ways. But it also looks fucking incredible, right? Like there's this one part in You Are Empty where it's like this kind of like river area, and you gotta go across a bridge or some bullshit like that. It almost looks like that one part in like somewhere in Chicago. They got a similar looking area that you actually see in that Russian movie Brought to when they go to the U.S. But it's also there's the bridge that I'm thinking of. You also see it in that fucking American movie Untouchables that was in the 80s or whatever. There's something about it, I think it's like the Western and then also kind of like Slavic appeal are off of like building designs that also kind of look the same here in the United States. And I think it's something more about just, 200 fucking year old buildings, the way they used to make them, and just the brick and window designs and just everything that was shared between the two that ends up making, the predominant developers on either side of that, create worlds that just appeal to me visually. But yeah, I'm going to end it there, but I'm going to really try to play Boiling Point some more soon because I fucking love that game. I want to replay